Greetings. Welcome to the Ontic Protective Intelligence Podcast. I'm Chuck Randolph, Ontic's Chief Security Officer. From 30 years as a military officer and over 25 transforming corporate security teams to function beyond their traditional roles, protection, risk management, and threat mitigation have been front and center throughout my career. This podcast series will explore the turbulent world of risk, security, and protective strategies through conversations with leaders and innovators in the field. Now, on to the discussion. Kathy Lavinder is the founder and executive director of Security and Investigative Placement Consultants, a retained executive search firm. She has more than 20 years of experience identifying and placing high-level security management, investigators, intelligence specialists, and related personnel. Kathy began recruiting in January 2000 after working in corporate investigations and journalism. She is frequently quoted in national publications on the topics of security and talent acquisitions. She also is a founding steering committee member of the OSAC Women in Security. Rachel Briggs, aside from being an Ontic keynote speaker, is a leading expert on security and has worked at the highest levels with the private sector and governments on corporate security, cybersecurity, and national security. Her report, The Business of Resilience, is regarded as the blueprint for effective global corporate security, and she is the author of a number of seminal and award-winning reports. Rachel is also a board member of the Global Center on Cooperative Security and an associate fellow of Chatham House. Kathy, Rachel, welcome to the Ontic Protective Intelligence Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Rachel, thank you for staying up or enjoying your afternoon. And Kathy, thanks for your morning with us. So always interesting to try to coordinate over the pond with this side of the water. So appreciate this. Now, I'm excited about this because of the initiative. I mean, when I think about who are a couple powerhouses in the industry that you put together that says, hey, we have an idea. And when we all talked about this, I was like, mind blown. This is amazing. So Kathy, tell me about the initiative and kind of tell me about the aha moment in which you both came together. Everyone's on listening right now to going, what is this? So fill us in.
Sure. Well, we're trying to look into the future a little bit, Chuck. We want to know what the future talent needs will be in the corporate security world. And that's a rather big topic. So when I started thinking about this, I thought, who can help me with this? One of the brightest minds in the field these days, the researcher who is really kind of known for looking at big topics, doing deep dives. And really the eureka moment when I first thought about this, I was sitting in the audience at the Ontic event last February in Austin, and Rachel was presenting. She was on the main stage, and she was talking about the business value of corporate security. And the more I listened, the more I was nodding, the more I was thinking, she's on the right track here. This is exactly right. And then I thought, well, what's the corollary to this? Where do you go from here? And I think talent is such an important piece of this function. For from my perspective, as someone who's been recruiting in this space 24 plus years, talent is the linchpin. Talent is the differentiator. Talent is vitally important to get right. And so we know that corporate security has an elevated position. Its influence is rising in many organizations. And so you have to get the talent piece. So that's when I had a conversation with Rachel, and I said, I think we ought to look at this. So I'm going to let Rachel talk about the methodology and what the goals are.
Yeah, Rachel, walk me through what that was like when Kathy walks up to you, maybe at the summit, which thanks for that, Kathy, and says, hey, I have this, I've heard you talk, I have this idea, where you're like, why haven't we done this before?
It was a hell yeah from me. Let's put it that way. I mean, the thing is, listen, I'm a data nerd. I love running surveys, interviewing people, processing data.
Wait, you love to run surveys?
putting it through the sausage machine in my brain and coming out with some sometimes some half decent ideas. But the opportunity to work with Kathy on this was just too tantalizing, because the data is great and we do need the data, and we need to know what percentage this and what percentage that. We get incredible insights from the CSOs and the C-suite members that I interview. But to be able to bring these two perspectives together was really kind of a hell yeah, a sort of a too good not to say yes kind of opportunity. And that's why I think this is a really special piece of work. And I think between us, we can really do something very interesting. We can not just bring each of our separate perspectives, but bring them together. And I think, the sum will be worth more than the whole will be worth more than the sum of its parts. So easier said than done, clearly. And the interesting thing is, I've been looking at some of the drivers that are changing corporate security functions, and I guess that was some of what Kathy picked up at the Ontic Summit. The fact that geopolitics and volatility, as Kathy said, are elevating the position of corporate security. The volatility and the fast changing nature of those operating environments mean that all departments, but especially corporate security, need agile thinkers. They need people who are capable of briefing the board, because the board cares about this stuff these days. All of these risks are interconnected. So, you need people who can collaborate, who have emotional intelligence, who have broader perspectives beyond security, people who kind of are tech savvy, who understand the ways in which the place of the workplace is changing. And we'll get into more of this detail as we go on. So I'd been looking at those trends for ages, and now working with Kathy, have the opportunity to say, and so what does this mean for the talent that you need? All of these changes in the external environment and the business environment, what does that mean in terms of who you need in your function, what those people need to do, how qualified and in what ways do they need to be qualified? What is that talent equation? So that's a long way of saying it was a hell yeah. And I think we've got the opportunity to do something really interesting, and I know of great value to security leaders and C-suite members.
So how did you both, when you meet at Summit, you said, this is great. You have a hell yeah moment, maybe a high five. In my mind, I picture this cool high five that happens. And then what's that next, just curious, what's that next step to say, okay, we're in? How do we boil this down? I mean, Kathy, there's a rapid evolution that, like Rachel said, we need to be far forward leaning in this perma crisis, as the AmFam report several years ago told us. I mean, how do you now start to say, we need to boil this down to something that we can use and help train and educate and teach people?
The first thing I started to do was to share with Rachel some of the things I'm seeing. I always feel like I have the ground truth, right? I'm on the front lines, and I hear from so many different clients. We work across sectors. We work across, obviously, multinationals, asset managers, the family offices of ultra high net worth individuals. We work with academia, healthcare, nonprofits, NGOs. It's a really broad spectrum. And I have a 30,000 foot perspective. I always think I'm in the catbird seat because I can see trends coming at me. And when I start to hear things being repeated a lot, then it's definitely an aha moment for me. But I've been feeling for a while that the ground is shifting, it's moving. And we just had this moment. We're at this inflection point where, we need to give advice and counsel. I think people are desperate for that. I post a lot on LinkedIn, and people always say to me, I value your insights. And thank goodness, I wouldn't be posting if I didn't think it was something worthwhile sharing. But we can take these anecdotal and individual situations and make more of it if we put it together in the right framework. So I started by talking about what I'm seeing. And, some of the issues that I post a lot about, sometimes I feel like a broken record, but I talk a lot about, where we work from, how we work, what people want versus what organizations want and need, and how there's sometimes conflict in those desires and wants. And so there was just a lot of sharing. And Rachel has, that broader research perspective as well as the business perspective. And I thought together we can really do something meaningful. And that's where we are. And Rachel can talk about really what her process is as she talks to people. We've really been very collaborative about trying to bring together a lot of the best minds and the deepest thinkers in this space to really kind of get into their heads a little bit and hear what they're saying and seeing and thinking and wishing for, and really kind of highlighting.
And just to say a little bit about the how here as well. I've already spoken to and interviewed somewhere around 25 chief security officers. I mean, I think pretty much everybody we approached said, absolutely, this is top of mind, and made time for us immediately, which was fantastic. So already, and Kathy and I have been talking about, what's coming out of those interviews and making sense of them. So already we've got a really good pointy view on how security leaders are seeing things. So that's the first thing, and we'll continue with those interviews as the process continues. The second thing is that we're going to be launching early June a survey for security professionals. So that's a great way for anyone in our profession, no matter how senior, how junior, no matter what their role is, to have their say, share their views. What are they seeing? What do they think is needed? What's missing? What are the pain points? So that survey will run through June and into early July. And then the third aspect of the research that we do, which is I know is very important to Kathy and the perspective she brings to this, and is indeed one of the hallmarks of the type of research I do, is I want to talk to people who are outside of the function as well. When I spoke at the Ontic Summit in February, one of the pieces of feedback I got most consistently from people there was how valuable it was to hear some of the insights that I'd gathered from CEOs, COOs, CFOs, the people who are responsible for recruiting the next generation of security leaderships in all of those different types of organizations that Kathy outlined. And so that's a little bit of the how. And then the what we'll be producing. We've certainly been asking the CSOs we've spoken to already, what do you want? What are the questions that you want answered? What are the data points that will be really useful for you? And from September onwards, we'll be releasing quite short, but very action-oriented insight pieces, which present the data, present the evidence, and have an editorial view from us. What does this mean? If you want to do things differently, what do you need to do differently when you go into the office tomorrow? A, B, C, D, E. Because as Kathy said, people are looking for practical guidance on how, if I need to sort of pivot and match this inflection point, what does that mean about who I recruit, how I retain talent, how I organize things, and what that bench strength should look like.
I was just going to say, looping in the C-suite, looping in other people who are non-security practitioners, I think is particularly valuable, because those are my clients. Usually I'm working on like a senior level search, and I'm working, with either the CHRO or the chief legal officer or the COO or some people who are in very senior level roles, and they are not security experts, but they are turning to me and my firm and my team for guidance on these fundamental issues. And then they're providing their wish list, their needs, their perspectives, their risk appetites, all of that. So we bring that all together. And I think that is essentially a big differentiator for a survey like this, that you have all those perspectives in one place.
Something I think is fascinating about this whole thing in Amazing is, Kathy, you're a bit of a bellwether for the industry, I think. Absolutely. You post things because you see trends. You're thoughtful, given your background and experience in journalism and in radio. I mean, I think you tend to look at things very thoughtfully. And as you said, Rachel, you're a data nerd. So you're happy to take those insights and say, let's prove the hypothesis, or let's see it. And as I listen to you both talk, I think about the old adage, like, what is crazy? Doing the same thing every day and expecting different results. I think you're right. We're at an inflection point because for the longest time, I'm making a generalization here, that we've been trying to get something different going to the same well for a long time. And now stepping up and saying, hey, look, Kathy, I'm hearing from the bill payers, if you will, the people that want to bring the C-suites on. And then, Rachel, you're hearing from the CSOs that they all want something different. And now the ability to say, okay, how do we get there? What's the formula? What needs to change? I mean, Kathy, do you have any, you recruit and hire a bunch of people. Do you have any thoughts on what needs to change or what is changing?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that they want business people before they want domain expertise, right? I hear this so often with, give me a really smart business minded individual and they will bring that business perspective. And, obviously underneath them, they can have various people who have domain expertise. They do not have to be the experts in security technology or threat intelligence collection and analysis. We don't want them to be. We're looking for strategic leadership who can really help think about risk holistically, smartly, and in a modern way. And again, have it aligned with our risk appetite, with our operational issues, with our history, with our culture. And that's not just somebody who walks in out of the door after having had a lengthy public sector career necessarily. They've done great things in one domain, but this is a different domain. And so I think there's a realization that you need to think creatively. You need to think in a more contemporary fashion about what real talent looks like and what talent is going to match your organizational needs.
Rachel, what do you see from talking to CSOs? I mean, what do you add to that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, sort of maybe sticking to the question of, what is it that companies are looking for, particularly at that leadership level, before maybe we talk about sort of what it means across the function as a whole. As Kathy said, absolutely, business acumen, business person first, security professional second. I hear that over and over again. I mean, in some of the really, really, really high risk companies, there's a little bit more of a tendency to want somebody to have that background at some point in their career. But less so in some of the less high risk industries. I also think that what you also need in a CSO is somebody who can, and maybe this is part of the business acumen package these days, but is not necessarily a given within our space, is the ability to use data and to use it in a variety of different ways. There's the data analysis piece, which gets done within the function, of course, and you may have somebody that is a specialist in that and using large data sets and et cetera. But what you need at leadership level is somebody who understands data and understands how it can be used to report, to describe, to paint a picture, and to help executives to understand the decisions that they need to make about resourcing, about collaboration, about governance forums, about their own role as executives within the company. And I see that as one of the really important components of the CSO role, which isn't just about delegating that down somewhere else. It's that the ability that senior executives have to play a data game, and I use that in air quotes, in as sophisticated as a way as other colleagues do at the C-suite level. And that's part of helping to tell the story of the function. And that as well is something that I think is really important at the C-suite level.
Yeah, if you can't determine your return on investment in ways from a macro standpoint and a micro standpoint, then they're not going to understand it, right? They're not going to see it in the same way that you do.
And I think you're right. I think you're both right. And we're about a point where people coming into the market, coming into the industry now are, we see generations coming in with a smartphone, with a supercomputer in their hand. Metrics, data driven is part of their lifestyle now. So I think those words like we're a data driven company or we're a data driven team, I mean, that's kind of becoming passe. It's kind of an expectation, that's a requirement. And I think the priorities maybe for CSOs nowadays and leaders, as we get beyond the inflection point, is that ability. What's a leader's job? To be where they can best control the action. They need to bring energy, clarity, and drive for results. And they need to understand capabilities because they're helping to enable decision makers. And, part of that is critical thinking. And the first thing that comes to my mind is like building diverse teams. And I think I've heard you talk about this before, Kathy. The building of a diverse team is not just what college you came from or what sport team, or if you're male or female, or where you live, but also in your skill sets. I mean, talk to me a little bit about how we're thinking and evolving in diversity.
Absolutely. Well, diversity is a given these days. We live in a very multicultural, multi-generational workforce. And I think organizations conceptually are on board with the idea of the benefit of diverse teams, multidisciplinary teams. When I look at a team and I see that everybody is from the same agency, that they all have the same background, I kind of shake my head and think, that's an old model. This is not the model that organizations are looking for and craving at this moment, which is people from different perspectives, educational backgrounds, as you mentioned, experiential backgrounds. And, I think that this is kind of contrary to my interests. But once you have the leader in place, I think it's really great to try to build, not buy, that talent underneath you.
Yep,
And because, you can create a bespoke team with a mission that is tailored to your organization's needs. And you can find those people who round out your team in a really meaningful way. And so I'm seeing smart leaders do that more and more. And, I'm always encouraging organizations, if you want to really get that diverse team, then do think about fresh approaches to going to market. Don't just post the jobs in the usual places and send it out to your known network. Try to go to unusual places. Look at, historically Black universities and colleges. Look at, military leavers, veterans groups. Look at all kinds of places and, every kind of listserv or posting site that you can imagine, to put it out there and write a description that is by definition open-ended and encouraging. And, there are words that you can put in there like, we have an open-minded attitude about security backgrounds and we can teach smart people our domain. We want to hear from you. If this catches your imagination, if you feel excited when you think about keeping people and organizations safe, protecting reputations, protecting operations, then we want to talk to you. We want to hear from you. And you're not putting it in some narrow box where you must have 5 years of this and 10 years of that. And you may not even need a college degree, right? There are strivers out there among us who are motivated and driven and looking for a place to make a difference. Go look for them. The lament I hear most often is, we didn't get any female applicants. And it's like, well, guess what? They don't fall in your lap. You have to make an effort, just as you do with people from underrepresented groups. You have to go to market and find them. It's the hunt and peck model of recruiting. And that's what we do.
We'll get back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, I wanted to tell you about the Ontic Center for Connected Intelligence. In the world of safety, security, and protection, we know that gathering and sharing information is crucial. That is why we created the Ontic Center for Connected Intelligence. The center is a hub for the ongoing exchange of security strategies and best practices, insights on current and past trends, and sharing valuable learnings through expert discussion and analysis. It's made up of seasoned experts with decades of experience across a wide range of disciplines. To find blogs, podcasts, webinars, white papers, and more, check out the center by visiting ontic.co/center. That's ontic.co/center. Well, I love the idea of making it available. I think about my old career and thinking like, hey, we had an intern program and we went out and we made it available to people that weren't coming from traditional ways, because for me, it was important to say, hey, look, there's a there's a way into this industry, and you don't have to have a badge, or you didn't have to serve. By the way, I bless those that do, and we're grateful to have them in the industry. I mean, I'm one of them as well, but the ability to say, hey, look, fresh thinkers from business school or something else, come on in. I mean, Rachel, I've heard you talk about the approach of, are you doing things differently? I mean, what do you add to this?
Yeah, I mean, Kathy's really covered so much of it. It's just isn't the bleeding obvious often the thing that you've got to kind of repeat over and over, right? And I was chatting to a CSO recently, and I said to the CSO, what would be most helpful to come out of this piece of work that Kathy and I are doing? And he said, how to recruit diverse talent, because we just can't get it. And I said, give me a brief overview of how you're recruiting right now. And well, mostly through our contacts on LinkedIn. And I said to him, well, off the top of my head, if you're going through your own professional networks, it's going to be really difficult for you to diversify your team. It's a great part of the strategy, but if you look at the effort that gets put in really to recruitment, so much of it does get put into our own networks, our previous networks, people who did the same job as us before. So it's really about remembering that if you're looking for a different type of person, a different range of expertise, then you have to do a different range of things to find them. And you have to have a different range of job descriptions to interest them. And making sure that you match what you're looking for with what you're using to look with. And again, it's pretty obvious, but and I'll just give one other example, which is when I did some research on diversity in the industry a couple of years ago, I spoke to one CSO, and he told me that their function had actually gone as far as deleting off the company's server all of the old versions of the job descriptions that they'd used, because what they realized was that they'd sort of produced the new versions, which had all of the inclusive language that Kathy talked about, and had got rid of the thou shalt have, 10 years of this and 15 years of that. But of course, people just, they're busy, they've got to get a job description online, and they reach for the last one they used. And he said, they actually had to go as far as to take everything from outside everybody's reach. And he said it was one of the things that they had done, which has really made a difference to attracting some new people. So I think, don't underestimate the power of basic different steps.
Yeah, I mean, that's an effort. As if you think about it, like we're gonna, and I hate to use kind of we're changing a paradigm within the company to say we're not using the old JDs, we're not doing this. I mean, there's a portion of security that's break glass in case of emergency. That will always be there, but I feel like you can train people in that. You can train people in crisis management, how to react in the moment, what we're doing. But I this idea of like, let's not go to the same pools and expect something different. We're breaking all the models. We're rewriting all the stuff. We're going to take the effort to do that. I mean, that's inspiring to me.
And, I'm seeing it play out. I'm seeing it work in a number of environments. For one example, a large healthcare organization that I'm aware of, when their CSO left, they decided to promote from within, but they didn't promote from the security vertical. They promoted from legal. When you think about it, legal, they're all about risk management. And there are lots of regulatory and risk management issues in healthcare. And they had underneath them a really strong team where, they had operational expertise and they had knowledge of the organization. They had day-to-day, year-to-year experience that could be leveraged and was ongoing and successful. So why not bring in a different thinker? I heard recently about another organization that brought somebody in from their market research side into their threat intelligence research side. Said, you've got those core research skills. Now we're just going to have you do this and put it through this lens. And look, these young people with those backgrounds, they usually have masters, they've gone to great schools and good programs, and they often have data capabilities, can deal with large amounts of data and all of that. And they take to it like a duck to water.
That's great. I mean, you think about like newspaper reporters an Intel analyst. Somebody once told me, like, it's kind of what you do with what you collect, at the end. Who are you reporting it to, or what are you analyzing it for? So that's a great call out. Let's talking about CSOs for a minute. Rachel, I think about the evolution of the CSO skills, competencies, qualities that are needed for this future set, which, is part of the initiative you're doing here. What do you see will be essential for future CSOs to effectively navigate all the changing demands? I mean, we're really talking about we're talking about aligning both priorities and aligning organizations. I think about the paper you wrote with Ontic before. We talked about across organizations and outside. I mean, what's your thoughts about C-suites and CSOs in a future set?
The CSO role, I think, going forward is going to be an increasingly critical one if it's done right for global organizations. And I think those organizations that find a CSO that has business acumen, that can operate at C-suite level, whether they happen to sit at C-suite or not, can use data, can lean into technology. So many CSOs that I talk to are really just scratching the surface in terms of technology. That's a whole other discussion in and of itself, who understand the ways in which they can actually bring to bear some of their business continuity and crisis management skills for the company, not just as themselves as the Swiss Army knife of the company, but as a leader that can help equip every other bit of the business to be better at business continuity and to be better at crisis management. And I think the other thing that I would say, which is more a quality and a type of way of leading, is somebody who's got courage. And I don't mean courage in, I think, the way that we tended to use the word within our community, given the very esteemed backgrounds that many CSOs have and incredibly brave things they've done in public service. I'm talking about the courage to fail, the courage to innovate. If we are truly at an inflection point in corporate security, which I think we are, then things have to change. And what that means is that sometimes folks will get it wrong. With all the right intentions, they will get it wrong. They will bet on the wrong bit of technology. They will stick their neck on the line to recruit somebody who just doesn't work out in a critical position because they're trying to change, they're trying to innovate. And so it's really important, I think, that those C-suite members who I hope are listening to this podcast and sort of thinking through what are those personal characteristics when I'm weighing up CSO candidate A versus B, somebody who's really willing to be quite a courageous leader and to do things differently with the function. I think, listen, it's a tall order. We're asking for a lot. But I think those are some of the things that really stand out to me as being critical components for that leader of the future.
Kathy, I've often in this space, I've heard you talk about this cyber physical merging and meshing. I mean, talk to us about your thoughts about that and what you're seeing.
Right. Well, I think the CSOs of today and the future have to be incredibly fluent in the InfoSec side of the house. Now, they're not going to be coders and ones and zeros people, and they don't have to be technical types. But if they're not really fluent in the issues of the day, the language of that domain, then they're going to struggle because these two sides, information and physical security, are inextricably linked and will be forever. And you have to really go out of your way to learn it if you don't already have that knowledge, if you haven't had that exposure. I was just recruiting for a role where the person had a Secret Service background and they happened to have the cyber investigation side. And they have obviously the protective and threat intelligence side and financial investigation side, actually. But when my client was saying, well, what's the benefit for the time that they spend on the cyber side of the house? We have a CISO, we have an InfoSec department. I said, it will be immeasurable. You will have no idea how that will cause them to work together more collaboratively, more fluidly, facilitate the goals of each domain. And they ultimately came around and said, "You're right." And I didn't need them to tell me that, but I appreciated that they had that moment where they realized that, that's a plus and we should really be taking advantage of it. I'm hearing more and more CSOs are saying, we want our whole team to either do a formal program like, Harvard cybersecurity course, or bring in the people from the information security side and talk to them and teach them the fundamentals, start the lines of communication, build those channels of communication, and create the flow of information and the collaboration there. And you have to begin with education, right? And education is at the core there. So I'm seeing the smart CSOs very much on that path with their teams. I think it's great. The only other thing I would add, just to move on a little bit, because Rachel has covered a lot of it, I think that the modern CSO and the future CSO is going to have to be a proactive leader, and a leader in every sense of the word, and proactive in the way that they are thinking about risk smartly, holistically, and creatively, and really keeping their finger on the pulse, benchmarking, talking to their peers, and asking the question all the time, what are you seeing? What's keeping you up at night? Where are your pain points? And learning. And so proactivity is my favorite word right now.
I love that, because in some ways, if you think about it, part of this inflection is also re-identifying ourselves, which is difficult. Oh my gosh, I'm a security leader. I'm a security leader. I need that security blanket, pun intended. But in fact, what we should do is flip that. I'm a leader who happens to lead the security function, and with that leadership comes these enabling functions. I think what you said about cyber, I think you're absolutely right. I spent a good amount of time working in information operations in the military, and I have this idea, like, what's required for a common operating picture that everyone wants to jump to is common operating information, data, telemetry, whatever, that we can all look at, and then common operating language. So that ability to grok or to speak cyber and vice versa helps cut to the chase and enable that we can get to a decision. Because whether it's malware or Russia's invaded Ukraine, or we have a mass shooting, God forbid, or something else, we need to get to that enablement part quickly. So I appreciate your insights on that.
And the thing is, Chuck, the board doesn't ask questions about these things in silos. The board cares about operational resilience and security, period. It doesn't want a briefing from one person and then a briefing from another person, and then they get left on their own to figure out how it all knits together. They expect grown professional business leaders today to have done that weaving together before they get to the boardroom. And so, so many of our debates about cyber have been around this convergence issue. Are we going to have a single function and who's going to lead it, and who's going to own the budget, and who's going to be in charge? And I think the grown-up way of dealing with this now is thinking about, how do we organize holistic security? It's not, in some organizations, it might be the CISO that leads, in others, it might be the CSO, in others, it might be somebody else still. All the board cares about is, are we safe? Are we secure? Are we resilient? And then how exactly that weaves together will depend on the specifics of your company. And that's why what Kathy has described about that future proactive leader that is able to read the runes of their company, is emotionally intelligent and can understand the risk profile, and therefore position the attributes that their function brings alongside those of cyber, of legal, of compliance. Beautiful harmony. That's what businesses are looking for.
This is exciting. I'm curious how like people are listening to this right now, like, I'm in, what do I need to do? How do people get involved? Where do they need to go? What do they need to do? What do you all need from us?
First of all, Chuck, I would just say we want to hear from them, right? It's really important to get a lot of different inputs. And, as Rachel has said earlier, you don't have to be at the top of the food chain. You have ideas, you have thoughts, you have perspectives, and we want to hear from them. But I'll let Rachel talk about the the logistics.
Exactly. It is absolutely come on in and give us your views. There's a couple of things really that we're interested in most immediately. The first is that we're going to be launching a survey at the beginning of June, which will run to early July. That will be available via the Clarity Factory website, clarityfactory.com, and maybe we'll be able to put the link alongside this webinar. We're also looking for funky case studies from folks within corporate security functions. What have you tried? What's working? What new initiative did you set up? What problem did you overcome, and in what way? Or maybe what problem can you not overcome and that others are struggling with, where perhaps you think we might have some data to help. So come to us, help us understand what your pain points are, help us understand what is working for you and might work for other people as well. But in the first instance, we'd love you to fill in that survey. And really, the more data we get, the richer those responses, the more benefit it will be back to our community. And all of this will be released from September onwards. People will have access to the data. We won't charge a penny for it. It will be out there. It will be circulating. So, we hope it's going to be of real benefit to security professionals who have a really, really important job right now.
And the more asymmetrical your view, the better in my mind, right? We want to hear those people who are kind of the offbeat thinkers.
And by the way, Kathy, asymmetric is the word that I'm bringing back. So God bless you for saying that. That made my morning. By the way, I'd just like to say on behalf of the industry to both of you, thank you. I mean, you both have been stalwarts in the industry, helping push information and helping push ideas for free, which I think is important. And I don't know if anybody, I'm sure you get plenty of accolades, but, thank you guys both. Thank you both for what you've done to help promote the industry. I think when I got into this industry years ago, it was not the same place it is today. And we have miles to go before we sleep, to coin the phrase. But thank you both for helping us get to those miles a little quicker. I can't thank you enough.
That's very kind of you. And, I think the thing that, why I found a kindred spirit in Rachel is she has the same passion that I do. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I appreciate this. And I can't wait to read some funky case studies. Rachel, Kathy, thank you so much for coming on to the Ontic Protective Intelligence podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
This episode was brought to you by the Ontic Center for Connected Intelligence. Learn more at ontic.co/center. Again, that's ontic.co/center. It was produced by AJ McKeon. Our music is a track called Monteverde Ride, and it was written by Brian Bristow and performed by the Smokin' Novas. Check them out on Spotify. Please remember to rate and review our podcast on iTunes and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions, we'd love to hear them. You can reach us at podcast@ontic.co or visit ontic.co/center for more information. Thanks for listening.